Here's my weekly video of embarrassing myself by labeling some of these sell high candidates just for them to blow up in week 6 and for you to mock me as usual. But Mike Evans will be a wide receiver that actually was a very interesting buy low candidate after week 3. If y'all remember, after the first 3 weeks, Chris Godwin was a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy football. We looked at the historical touchdown rate of these two players, labeled Chris Godwin as that sell high candidate, saying we are going to see more touchdowns going in the direction of Mike Evans very soon. And what do we have over the past 2 weeks? You get the 3 passing touchdowns over in the direction of Mike Evans. And with Evans going into the future, I think we can say he's who he was all along, right? Now, there is that massive bonus in that Baker Mayfield is playing some of the best quarterback play in the entire NFL at the moment. Now, of course, we can stand back and we can say, okay, well, Baker's probably not going to be a top 5 to 10 quarterback rest of season, but Baker probably gives you above average quarterback play in this offense, which is very exciting. And Evans, in his age 31 season, has shown no signs of slowing down whatsoever. This is going to be more so surrounding the idea of the target volume in this offense. And while, yes, Godwin was on the heater early in the year, Evans has been on the heater as of late. What we have to look at is with the targets being funneled through both these receivers, the assumption that Evans continues to dominate is probably not going to come true. And instead, it will be a very volatile situation where you're going to get the 2 to 3 weeks of the Mike Evans spikes, the 2 to 3 weeks of the Chris Godwin spikes. If you look at my rest of season rankings, we have both these guys as low in wide receiver 1s, high in wide receiver 2s. I have Chris Godwin wide receiver 13 in our rest of season ranks. I have Mike Evans wide receiver 15, which obviously makes you think, oh, okay, well, do you still have him as a sell high? Yes, because if we go over to the site and we use the trade finder, you're actually going to see that every time you pull up a Mike Evans trade, you see him going at an extreme price. Like this first trade, somebody traded Mike Evans for Amari Cooper, Kenneth Walker. Now, obviously, based off the quarterback play, you would very, very easily prefer Evans over Amari, but getting the top 10 running back added on is just a no-brainer. Somebody was able to pair up Evans and Christian Kirk to go get CeeDee Lamb. Somebody was able to pair up Evans and Nick Chubb to go get Justin Jefferson, and somebody actually sold Evans for Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba. So how I'm viewing Evans right now is I think he's that high-end wide receiver 2 that's going to give you a ton of wide receiver 1 weeks, but also with the target share that Chris Godwin has in this offense, you are going to get some of those low performances like what you had back in week 2 against the Lions with the 42 receiving yards, like what you had in week 3 in the really tough matchup against the Broncos with 17 receiving yards, where if you can tier up to a receiver like Justin Jefferson, where those down performances just simply don't exist, I think that would be very interesting. And after back-to-back weeks here with 23 fantasy points, I think it could be possible based off the trades you're finding in the trade finder. Now, going over to the running back, that is my RB1 currently with my team in the Flock League. And you'll see that I actually have 3 players in this video that are on my own fantasy football team that I just threw out in the trade block in my own league. James Conner. With James Conner, yes, this past week, he was great. I mean, 2 weeks ago, he was great against Washington as well. I mean, you're looking at a running back that so far this year is averaging over 15 points per game. Now, the thing is, going into the future, we have to keep into consideration a few different factors with James Conner. One, why was he not drafted as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 in fantasy drafts this year? The long injury history that you have for a running back that was drafted back in 2017 that has never played a full season because you have the laundry list of injuries. The second thing is you had the running back at Trey Benson that was taken near the top of the NFL draft this past year in the 3rd round that presumably was going to have a roll down the stretch this season. Now, obviously, I drafted James Conner because I knew with my team, I was desperate for production early in the year, and that's exactly what James Conner was going to give us. And at the same time, I don't expect that James Conner scales back this production anytime soon, just because if you look at the usage of Trey Benson, it's been non-existent. Trey Benson has literally been an afterthought. I'm sure you haven't heard his name spoken in months. But that doesn't change the fact that there is that outside chance that the last 2 months of the year, he comes out and he starts just to see 25, 30% of this offense, and that scales back the usage of James Conner. There's also that chance with James Conner that you get a nagging injury popping up, which is what we've seen historically. And last but not least, you don't really have the receiving usage, where so far through the first 5 games, James Conner's actually only averaged 2 targets per contest. So you've really just been banking on what you've had specifically with the rushing touchdowns, which is something that's a little worrisome for me, knowing that Kyler is going to go out there and Kyler's going to take a decent amount of these rushing TDs. So if I look across the board with Conner, I don't know if he's going to get much better from here. And I do see a couple potential red flags in the second half of the season. So I'm fine going through, throwing him on the trade block. If I can sell him as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, while nobody's thinking about any of these red flags because they're not really impacting him right now, it is something I would look to do. Going over to the trade finder that we have on the site. And of course, always, if you're ever going to go make a trade, go use the trade calculator we have on the site. Go use the trade finder we have on the site. They're completely free for y'all on flockfantasy.com. What's actually funny is y'all broke flockfantasy.com yesterday because of the amount of people using those tools. We had to buy additional servers. It's back up. So yeah, you can go ahead, use those tools for free. But regardless, with the trade finder, James Conner, Josh Downs was traded for Malik Neighbors. Give me Malik Neighbors there. Somebody traded James Conner for Cooper Kupp. Easily give me Cooper Kupp. Somebody traded Conner and Kyler for Kupp Bijan. Easily give me Bijan Kupp. Somebody traded Conner straight up for Bijan. I mean, in my own league, I would do all of those trades if I got lucky enough to get one. But obviously, I'm not telling you to panic sell James Conner for Devin Singletary. This is a sell high video. You're not trying to sell low on these guys. Now, going over to our next running back, we are going to be looking at Ramondre Stevenson. Now, with Ramondre Stevenson, he was on my bench this past week. After a game against the Niners, where he had his 4th fumble in a row and lost the fumble, the New England Patriots were saying that Ramondre Stevenson was benched. Now, speaking of the Niners, they play on Thursday night, and if you are not already on Underdog, if you go to the link in the description or comment section, you'll get a free Brock Purdy pick, more than less than half a total yard. If you sign up with code FLOCK, plus with code FLOCK, you will get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000, and you're going to be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night through flockfantasy.com as well, so make sure you are taking advantage. But looking at Ramondre Stevenson, this is a running back that was quote-unquote benched. However, against the Miami Dolphins, he actually had 19 fantasy points. His second best game all season if you were just looking at the raw points on the surface. But we have to take into consideration a couple different things. One, this was a game against Miami where it was kind of close, where it's not like the Miami Dolphins threw 30 points up on the board and the New England Patriots got boat raced. No, the Patriots could run the ball somewhat. I mean, they didn't have to just completely abandon it, which will be the case in a lot of these Patriots games, like you had against the Jets a couple weeks back, like you had against the Niners a couple weeks back. But besides that, if you're looking at the underlying snap usage, you actually only had 47% of the snaps played for Ramondre Stevenson. So while, yes, the production was there as if he didn't get benched, no, Antonio Gibson played the exact amount of snaps. So Ramondre Stevenson finds himself in a position in which he is a committee running back in one of the worst offenses in the league. Now, yes, Drake May coming into New England maybe quote unquote saves this offense. And y'all know I'm never going to sit here and pretend that I'm some expert quarterback guru scout. I know I'm not. You know I'm not. You know I'm an idiot. So what I do is I look at sports books for baseline expectations. And what sports books are putting out this week is that the New England Patriots, even with Drake May, are going to be the lowest scoring offense in the NFL against the Houston Texans. A lot of this has to do, obviously, with the offensive line play, as well as the wide receiver core. And I don't want a committee running back in that environment. Looking at trades that were made involving Ramondre Stevenson this week, somebody traded Ramondre for DK Metcalf. Give me the wide receiver 2. Somebody traded Ramondre, Geno, and Chase Brown for Deebo Samuel. Give me the high-end wide receiver 2 there. Somebody traded Ramondre for Devon Achane. Hell, at least the Miami Dolphins have the path to be a great offense in the second half of the year. Give me Achane. Somebody traded Ramondre and Olave for Breece Hall. Give me Breece Hall. Somebody traded Ramondre for the elite quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Give me the elite quarterback. If you're looking at my rest of season rankings over on the site, I have Ramondre Stevenson currently at RB31, right behind guys like Zach Moss, Rico Dowdle, and Rachaad White, who are all in much better offenses. Now, moving over to our next player. Terry McLaurin is a receiver that I actually sold in the Flock League after the 20-point blow-up. And I know it may look horrendous with Jaden Daniels playing as if he is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL right this second. And I want to be on record. I want to be on the right side of history here and just let you know that, yes, I believe Jaden Daniels is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, not necessarily long term, but that's today. If you look at the efficiency that Jayden Daniels has had as a passer, Daniels has been absurd with what he's been able to do. This is a CJ Stroud level situation where he's coming in and he's putting up one of the best rookie quarterback performances of all time, not just in fantasy because of his rushing upside, but really with his overall play in its entirety. And this is a lot of people viewing Terry McLaurin as an elite level wide receiver. Because the issue with Terry McLaurin, presumably throughout his entire NFL career, is that you've been in a spot where, Terry McLaurin has just dealt with some of the worst quarterback play in the league since 2019. But what's very funny is even with Jayden Daniels being that elite level quarterback, even with Jayden Daniels coming in and elevating this team to great heights, and I want to be on record, he has done that. It's not like the Washington Commanders have significantly more passing volume this year than what we've seen in years past. What's actually very funny is if you look at Jayden Daniels, you're averaging 214 passing yards per game in Washington this season. And if you go back to last year with much worse quarterback play, what we actually saw is you saw the Washington Commanders be at 219 passing yards per game. So while Daniels has elevated the overall play of this Washington offense with less turnovers, with the added on rushing ability, it is not inherently translating to significantly more wide receiver points scored because of the volume of this passing attack. If we look at Terry McLaurin, this is a receiver that currently this season is averaging about 6 to 7 targets per game. Obviously, you have the massive blowups over the past 3 weeks with 20 points, 18 points, and 13 points. McLaurin is great. Jayden Daniels is phenomenal, but given the playing style that we've had from Daniels, similar to what we've seen historically with Lamar Jackson, in these quarterbacks where so much of their value is derived with what they can do on the ground themselves. We'll talk about Michael Pittman and Anthony Richardson a little later on. I want to be on record. Yes, Daniels is much better than A-Rich. You do have a somewhat cap ceiling here. So if I'm looking at my rest of season ranks on Terry McLaurin, instead of viewing him as a high-end wide receiver 2, I think he's more so a low-end wide receiver 2/flex that's there every week. And if you could package up McLaurin and get somebody like Deebo Samuel who's going to be in a much better passing offense, I would do that. Even going and getting Brandon Ayuk in that same Niners offense by going and trading Terry McLaurin, Romeo Doubs for Ayuk, I would do that as well. I know some people may disagree with it. If you could trade like a little package of guys like Terry McLaurin, Jerome Ford, JSN for CeeDee Lamb, I think that would be very interesting. Or maybe you trade Terry McLaurin for Deontay Johnson and Travis Etienne there. Now, moving this over to our next wide receiver, Darnell Mooney had the absolute blow up with everybody and their mom watching against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Darnell Mooney was phenomenal. He played 98% of the snaps, and Darnell Mooney has played 90+% of the snaps every single game this season. He's out there on the field every single Kirk Cousins drop back. And if you look at the target volume, he had 16 targets, 105 receiving yards, and multiple receiving touchdowns. So this puts him in a caliber of a receiver that you're not just a field stretcher. You can be a target hog. You can dominate the market share numbers of this Atlanta Falcons offense. Well, at least that's what you'd assume. But actually, what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the market share numbers that you had with Kirk Cousins under center, going to overtime, throwing the ball 58 times, and throwing for over 500 receiving yards. So here's what we're going to do. And I want to give Darnell Mooney all his flowers. Obviously, phenomenal game. And Darnell Mooney looks like he is a massive impact here for this Atlanta Falcons offense. And the Falcons would be much worse without Mooney. But I just want to set some baseline expectations. In a game where you get 155 passing yards week 1 for Kirk Cousins, 15 receiving yards for Darnell Mooney accounts for 9.67% of this team's receiving volume. We go over to the next week. Darnell Mooney accounts for 88 receiving yards out of 241 passing yards for Kirk Cousins. That is 36% of this team's receiving yardage. We go over to the next week. You have 66 receiving yards out of 230 Kirk Cousins passing yards. That is 28% of this team's passing volume. We go over to the next week. You have 56 receiving yards for Darnell Mooney, and you have 238 passing yards for Kirk Cousins. That is 23% of this team's volume. And you go to this final week where you have the 105 receiving yards out of 509 Kirk Cousins pass attempts. That is 20% of this team's volume. So if we're looking at Darnell Mooney, the reality of the expectations should be that he is seeing anywhere from about 22 to 26% of this team's receiving volume per week. And if we just go through and set a baseline expectation where Cousins is averaging about 250 passing yards per game going forward, he's had one game with more than that, obviously doubling that this past week. And every other game has been slightly below 250 passing yards. And we give Darnell Mooney 25% of this. The raw expectation should be about 60 receiving yards per game for Darnell Mooney, which would put him as a receiver hitting 1,000 receiving yards on the year through 17 weeks. That's just more so going to put him in the class of that borderline flex play every week that you're considering the matchup on, or if you have a bye, if you have an injury, then you are going to play him, but he is not necessarily a must start top 20 wide receiver that you're jamming in every single week. So going through and looking at some of these trades involving Darnell, you had Darnell Mooney traded for Puka Nacua. Give me Puka where we have seen Puka actually with the ceiling to go out and eclipse that top 10 finish. Somebody traded Darnell Mooney and Jamison Williams for Davante Adams, specifically in a league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. I probably prefer Adams. Somebody used Mooney as that little sweetener to get up from Josh Jacobs to Jonathan Taylor. Somebody was able to go Darnell Mooney and Najee Harris to buy low on Tyreek Hill, where obviously Mooney this past week has outscored what Tyreek's been able to do the past 3 weeks combined. I think that would be very interesting. But yeah, Darnell Mooney I've ranked in the same range as these guys like George Pickens, Rome Odunze, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Zay Flowers rest of season. Now let's move over to Chuba Hubbard. Now I want to be on record here and say that Chuba Hubbard's been phenomenal over the past 3 weeks. Over the past 3 weeks, Hubbard has averaged about 22 points per game. He has been a top 5 running back over the past 3 weeks. And going into the future, I believe that Chuba Hubbard will have a role in this offense every single week, regardless of if you have Jonathan Brooks coming in or not. But what we actually had a chance to see against the Chicago Bears is the Carolina Panthers scale back a little bit offensively, show a little more of their true colors. And in this game, Chuba Hubbard was still just fine. In this game, he still scored 17.5 fantasy points, maybe indicating the massive floor that he's going to have going into the future. However, the issue is, even if you expect that Chuba Hubbard is going to have a role in this offense going into the future, even with a healthy Jonathan Brooks, and even if you assume that Chuba Hubbard's a starter, which he's probably not, it's probably Jonathan Brooks, do you want a committee running back in a bad offense? Now, while the Carolina Panthers do not look like they are nearly as bad as the situation in which what we have with the New England Patriots, this is still a situation where the Carolina Panthers should probably be a bottom 10 offense rest of season, and Chuba Hubbard will be in a committee as soon as Jonathan Brooks reinserts himself, which could either be this week or next week, or maybe at the very latest 2 weeks from now. So in any game where Jonathan Brooks misses, Chuba Hubbard will be a must-start player, and any game that Jonathan Brooks plays, I think it's a split backfield where I don't want to put Jonathan Brooks in my lineup. So I think you have a ticking time bomb here that when Brooks comes back, even if he's a good real-life player and will still have a real-life role, you're not starting the dude. Somebody traded Geno and Chuba Hubbard for Kyron Williams. I don't even know why I put that here. You will see if you go over to the site and use the trade finder that some people make the most garbage trades you could ever imagine. Somebody traded Chuba Hubbard for Brian Thomas. This is a good example of a trade that I like. Somebody traded Chuba Hubbard for Brian Robinson. Somebody traded Chuba Hubbard for David Montgomery. These trades where maybe you get the slightly worse running back for this week and next week, but in the long term, when we know that Jonathan Brooks will be back in, you actually have some running back value left over rather than just a little baggie of dust. Now, moving over to our next running back, we are going to be looking at Javante Williams. Now, Javante is yet again another running back that I have in the Flock League. Javante's coming off the best week of his career so far, where you actually get the 16 fantasy points. I had him in my lineup specifically because the Denver Broncos were favored against the Las Vegas Raiders. So we are assuming that we are actually going to be able to see a considerable amount of rush attempts here for Javante Williams in this offense. And we had a total of 18 opportunities for Javante Williams. Going back 2 weeks ago against the Jets, you had 19 total opportunities for Javante. But fundamentally, is Javante Williams any different than the running back he was through the first 3 weeks of the season? No, he's not. He's still the starting running back that's seeing anywhere from about 50 to 65% of the snaps in his backfield. That is in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And if you can look at the trend of this video, I am not a big fan of the committee backs in bad offenses. That includes Ramondre, Javante, and Chuba Hubbard. Obviously, Chuba Hubbard right now is a bell cow. That's going to change when Brooks comes in. So I threw Javante on the trade block in the Flock League, looking at the trade finders. Some people traded Javante and Anthony Richardson for Josh Allen. I just traded for Anthony Richardson in the Flock League. I would love to trade this combo for Josh Allen if possible. Somebody traded Javante for Jalen Waddle. Somebody traded Javante and Trey Tucker for Devonta Smith. Somebody traded Javante and Chris Olave for A.J. Brown. But yeah, I mean, if you could use Javante as just that throw-in to get that 2-for-1 tier up, I think it makes a ton of sense. I have Javante and Chuba Hubbard ranked. I'm about RB33, RB34 in our rest of season ranks, right in the same range as guys like Rachaad White, Ramondre Stevenson, and Chase Brown. Now going over to Michael Pittman Jr. I don't think I have to sell you on this one too much. Yes, over the past 2 weeks, Pittman's had the best 2 weeks of his season. And what have we seen? We've seen Joe Flacco under center here. And what's really funny is if we look over the past 2 years, you've had 8 games where Anthony Richardson has played. And those 8 games, Michael Pittman Jr. averages about 11 points per game. In the 13 games you've had no Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman Jr. averages about 16.5 points per game. I believe that Anthony Richardson can be a good real-life quarterback still. I don't necessarily think that you need to be completely sold on Anthony Richardson having any upside from turning out to be something later on. But we know with A-Rich, he's going to be the quarterback that this Colts offense is slowing the ball down with, where you're going to see a considerable amount of rush attempts, and you are not going to see a ton of passing volume. So looking at these Pittman trades, somebody traded Pittman for Olave, give me Olave. Somebody traded Pittman for Waddle, give me Waddle. Somebody traded Pittman and Wan'Dale for Jordan Mason, give me Jordan Mason. Somebody traded Pittman and Charbonnet for DJ Moore. We're going to go DJ Moore there. And yeah, if you're looking at my rest of season ranks, I have Pittman ranked right in the same range as these guys like Ladd McConkey and Jamison Williams. But I think that's all I got for you. And I do want to remind you, before you make any trades, please go use the free trade calculator that we built out over on the site. Go use the trade finder to make sure you're not getting ripped off. They're completely free over on flockfantasy.com. And also, if you wanted to get that Brock Purdy more than less than half a total passing yard pick for this Thursday night, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. If you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy, you will get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. We'll get that free Brock Purdy pick, and you'll get a free team review in the live stream that we are hosting every single night. But I think that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you and really hope I get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.